This is my custom-built Murphy bed. I was moving into a new place this year, and I really wanted to make sure I could get as much out of the space as I could. I wanted something that was going to come out sideways rather than long ways. And if you look at most of the plans online, you're going to find that they fold out long ways, more like a bed, whereas I kind of wanted this to double as a couch. So I dug around for a while and eventually came across a build by DIY Tyler, which I really liked. Luckily, I've got a friend named Felicia who owns some of the tools that I needed for this. She helped me modify the plan so the bed would fold out the right way. And then she also kind of gave it some artistic touches. If it wasn't for her, this bed would have been a really ugly plywood box. I don't know if you've taken a look at lumber prices lately, but they're interesting.
So instead we used all salvaged lumber. We just drove around and we looked for old boards, old pieces of plywood, and collected them all. The first step was cutting all the boards to size, and we used a table saw and a chop saw. The most challenging bit of which was laying out the front panel of the bed. The plans called for 2 large plywood sheets, but none of our plywood quite reached those dimensions. So we had to create it out of 3 separate sheets, which took a little bit of math, a little bit of effort to lay everything out. We cut the segments for Felicia's design out of 1/4-inch MDF, which is the only lumber that we bought for this project. We used a jigsaw and an orbital sander to make everything smooth. Then with a little bit of wood glue and a brad nailer, we applied them to the front and sides of the cabinet. Then it was time to start painting. Felicia told me it was really important to mix one's paints, so I made sure to thoroughly mix all of our paints. Because the wood was going to be a sort of Frankenstein collage of MDF and old plywood, we decided rather than trying to stain it, we would paint it. And so we went with a brown undercoat and a black wash. This was another piece of Felicia wizardry, and the results, of course, looked pretty good. I looked in a lot of places for some feet that I liked, but the ones that seemed easiest ended up actually being from Amazon, and the molding was just something we picked up from Lowe's. Finally, it was assembly day. It was over 85 degrees that day, so sorry for my shirtlessness. The first stage was to assemble the cabinet itself using pocket screws and wood glue. Then it was time to assemble the bed frame. This is where things got just a little bit challenging because the front panels, which are also the bottom of what holds the mattress, the bed frame, have to match up perfectly. So it was kind of a moment of truth of, did our measurements work? Did all that scrap lumber come together properly? Then we applied the last few pieces of the front design and the legs. Then it was time to attach the swivel brackets, which attach the bed frame to the sides of the cabinet and are what allow it to fold up inside. Now, DIY Tyler's plans called for brackets that are 1 inch in thickness, meaning 1 inch from plate to plate. And the ones that I bought had been advertised as such, but actually ended up being about 0.87 inches thickness, which was a huge pain, and it caused everything to be slightly less than square. Another difficulty with this stage is just getting the bed frame to sit at the right height so that you can mount it to the appropriate spot on the cabinet. I ended up taking stacks of books and adding and subtracting 1 book at a time to hold the entire bed frame up while the brackets got attached. All in all, it took a few hours. Definitely budget extra time for this. So that's it. I think all in all, the project cost about $300, and that's factoring in, wood glue, wood putty, paint, the MDF panels, the occasional tool here or there. I've been sleeping on the bed for maybe a month and a half now, and so far it still feels really sturdy. Everything held up pretty good, and I love it. So, yeah.